Hi, I'm Sharmila Beesmahan, along with Sarah. I helped set up Speaking Volumes in 2010, and we were at Penn together, where we were promoting international writers, but we really wanted to follow our passion of not necessarily having to promote writers who just had a new book out.
Hi, I'm Nick Chapman. I joined Speaking Volumes in 2012, and I am fully on board with the mission of getting underrepresented writers the recognition they deserve.
So, Breaking New Ground is a brochure with 100 British writers of colour who write for children and young people, and also illustrators. We printed 30,000 copies of these, and they're going to be distributed to schools all over the country. So, most schools in the country will receive a copy. And we are also going to reprint it. We've sent it to festivals, to programmers, to librarians all over the country.
I'm Sarwat Chadha. I've been a full-time writer for just over 10 years. I specialise in doing fantasy stories because those are the things I absolutely love. I've written YA, I've written mid-grade, I've written comics, I've written TV series, but I think I tend to specialise on stories with an Eastern angle. The series that I think really helped establish me as writing within that genre were the Ash Mystery trilogy, which are here. So the first one, Ash Mystery and Savage Fortress. I've always been a big fan of mythology. I think the first books I read were about the Greek myths and then, of course, the Norse myths. But then when I became a writer myself, I realised there's not very much looking at Indian mythology or stories set in that region. So I thought it'd be really great to do my own. So got this idea of a British-born Asian kid, Ash, 14 years old, some holes, and he's been sent over to India to stay with his uncle and aunt. And then he finds this magical arrow that's been forged by the goddess Kali, who's the goddess of death and destruction out of Indian religion. What's great is, even though she's horrific and has like black skin and fangs and 8 arms and carries all these weapons, she even has like a severed head. She's actually the goddess that fights demons. So she must be more terrifying than the demons themselves. And I thought that'd be a really cool angle. And so what was really great was that HarperCollins in the UK and Scholastic in the US were really excited by it. So I published that trilogy.
Hi, I'm Yasmin Ismail. I'm an author and illustrator for children's books around ages, let's say 0 to 6. I think 6 would be the maximum. I've got a few books with Bloomsbury Publishing. I'm a Girl, Nothing, Time for Bed Fred, Specs for Rex. I've made books with Walker Books. I've done the Kiki and Bobo series. There's 2 of those, Sunny Day and Kiki and Bobo's Super Surprise. It's called Kiki and Bobo's Birthday Surprise. When I started in children's literature, I had another career before. I used to be an animator, and I had an animation production company, and it was such hard work. It's really like everything's hard work, but yeah, it sort of didn't pan out. I had a company, and then we dissolved the company. We're doing quite well, actually, and after that I didn't know what to do with my life. And I'd always loved drawing, I'd always loved stories and illustrating and all of that, and that goes hand in hand with the animation practice I did. But what attracted me was the fact that I met someone who did it, and I never even thought of it as something as a career. It was like that was always for other people, it wasn't for me. But I met someone who did it, and I thought, you illustrate, but people pay you, and then I started looking into it. I thought, well, this is what I want to pursue. It was like someone telling me that this dream job existed, and I went, I'm pursuing that.
My name is Tariq Mahmood. I was born in Pakistan. I grew up in north of England, and I work between Lebanon and here.
My name is Pete Kalu. I was born in Manchester. I'm still in Manchester, and I probably will be in perpetuity in Manchester.
We published some folk tales with one of our first actions, but our work, in a sense, goes by Peter wrote about black crime fiction, about black science fiction, way back before it became trendy. But what we had also set out to do before we talk the specifics of work, that there is a London-centric aspect, but a white London-centric aspect that really dominates how narratives are structured, how books are published, which books are published, which stories are validated. Now, we didn't want to go along that road. We didn't write so that the publishers could publish. So some of the stories, certainly I'll talk of mine. My very first story was written as an explanation that we dreamt of a better world. Yes, we wanted to love. It was a story
What's the
of
name of that book?
Hand on the Sun was my very first book that I wrote, but that's a long, long time ago. And the books of the current phase that I'm writing, all my last 3 novels have been set in the War on Terror. The reason I've set the novels on the War on Terror and written for young adults and adults is because you're 14, 15 one day, and by the time you finish school and gone somewhere else, you're in the army and you're out fighting in other countries. Now, I know people like that. And I wanted to address that when war and racism is so prevalent as it is around us here, then I wanted to set my stories in there, but unapologetically. I am not interested in playing up to the privileges and stereotypes of white people. We wanted black characters on the front of our books.
So my name's Ken Wilson-Max. I am an author and illustrator. I'm a Zimbabwean. I came to England in 1986, thinking I knew everything, and very quickly realized that was not the case. Fell into publishing. It wasn't my first choice. I was trained as a graphic designer, and had my first book published in 1994 called The Big Yellow Taxi, followed by 6 more books in the same series. And then that launched me in the US, where I became quite well known. And it was really strange to be anonymous in the UK, but well known in the US. And since then, I have worked on between 60 and 70 books for children, more than half feature non-white characters.
So I'm Polly Ho Yen, and I'm at the moment a middle grade author mainly. I've written 3 novels for the middle grade market, and I've also brought out a book for younger children too most recently. So I've been writing, I've always been writing, but I feel like I was properly started writing when I was actually doing a different job, when I was working as a teacher, as a primary school teacher in southeast London. And that was when I wrote my first book, which is Boy in the Tower, my debut. And this came out in 2014. And so obviously things were going on in the scene before then, but that was when I kind of felt like I was out in the world, fully hatched as an author. And then since then I've written Where Monsters Lie and Fly Me Home. And then the book for younger children was a collaboration with Binny Talib and Stripes Publishing, which was actually a commissioned piece, my first kind of commissioned piece of writing.
Writing outside of the box is something that is scary for publishers, also scary for booksellers as well. I mean, I had one bookseller whose name I cannot remember now, who's saying, "Oh, we're not sure about having the Ash books on our shelves because we've got no Indians in our village." And I thought, well, you've probably got no hobbits in your village either, but I'm sure you've shifted a few copies of Lord of the Rings.
I mean, I think there are very many obstacles to becoming a writer of colour in the UK, and we can see that from the research that they're not there. So why is that? So there's several different things at play. I mean, firstly, of course, there is just at the moment there isn't that mirror reflected to young writers, so they're not seeing themselves, so they're not thinking that is something that is possible for them, and that route feels unfamiliar, perhaps.
So the current barriers to authors and illustrators of colour getting into publishing they're all complex for a start. Nothing is simple about it. First of all, you've got a level of skill and ability that you just need, no matter what colour or background you have. Your stories have got to be good. When you add to that the fact that in this country, some people don't think people of colour are good enough, you've got a problem of overcoming them. and still holding on to your own feeling, in your own internal feelings, and keeping yourself positive, really. Thirdly, you've got the idea that the fact that as a business, it isn't prepared for anything other than what it's been used to for the last few hundred years, which is books for people in this country who are pretty much white. Whether they're middle class or not is not the issue. A lot of people say that, but it's a white perspective you're trying to feed into, and you're trying to bring your own perspective into that. And for more than most publishers, this isn't a priority for them.
The most important obstacles facing writers of colour or artists of colour is to accept that our issues related to our colour are not skin deep. They're embedded in a deep, deep history. And secondly, to actually tell our stories in whichever medium that we do without fear, without worrying of having to please anyone, because we can never please the master.
Those are interesting points. I think in terms of the obstacles that we face, they could be obstacles to do with how we represent writers, or how writers of colour represent life of being in black communities, because there may be a tension between what we want to represent and what publishers want to publish, and that disparity, that conflict may inhibit us from getting published. They may send us away and say, you know, there are too many black characters in this one novel. Can you add a white sidekick?
There has been a moment where I have been told to whitewash a character. I wasn't told to, I was asked if I would consider it. She was a black character, and I was surprised. I wasn't asked directly, I was asked indirectly, would that be a possibility? And they would consider purchasing the book. And I was shocked that someone felt comfortable to bring that to the table. And I thought, that's a problem. That's a really big problem.
Key thing with Breaking New Ground is actually presenting the authors and illustrators produce under every genre and under every single topic there is. Yes, it's not the idea of saying, oh, that's an Asian author that's going to be about forced marriage, or oh, he's Muslim, so it's probably about terrorism. Those things honestly drive me insane. Yeah. So what's brilliant about Breaking New Ground is saying, right, there are the authors, and look, they do comedy, they do things with funny animals, they do hard-hitting thrillers, they do fantasy. I think that's something that's actually really important to send out to librarians, to booksellers, to other publishers, that diverse authors write diversely. And I think that's something that tends to be, I think we perhaps naturally fall into the idea of pigeonholing, and that's something we've really got to break out of. And so hence Breaking New Ground is a really, really good project to do that. It's to show that we write everything.
Two sides for Breaking New Ground for me, because it's my very personal experience of it, which has been fantastic and has actually really opened doors for me and has started to connect me with different organisations and people that I wasn't to before. And then there's that magnified to all, to as many as possible. And so the positivity of that is just so far reaching, I feel. That it's just continually giving, you know, different role models for young writers to connect to, identify with. You know, the brochure is really diverse. We're all doing different things. We're all coming from different backgrounds. You know, it's a really interesting reflection of modern children's publishing. So it feels It feels very exciting, I feel. That's my that's the word that's sort of jumping out. It feels exciting to be part of it and exciting that it's happening.
Being in this brochure is a fantastic opportunity to show young and emerging talent who are considering getting into publishing that there are people who have been doing it for a while, like myself. It's also an opportunity to show publishers that where they thought there was only a few people within their industry that are from a different background being represented, they can now see 100, and it's 100 of many hundreds. So I think that all around, I think being in that brochure is a fantastic honor.
Well, if we don't break new ground, the old ground becomes a bit overcrowded. And that's the one thing, and quite rotten to the core. I think it's very important to let 1,000 flowers blossom. It's very important to get 1 million voices heard. And in this clutter, if we can't bring some sense of who we are, and we can't make any sense of what we ought to be, then it becomes a very bad world. It becomes a world full and run by monsters. So it's very important to try to create a new literary landscape as it is to create a new political and social landscape. They're not separated. They're all actually interlinked.